Hello, everyone. Uh, Happy to be here. Good morning, my time in EST time. I'm Gabriella, co-founder of Wetech, and I'm excited to welcome you to our legal clinic today and our last Women's Month event. Today, this event is going to be focusing on the legal landscape, focusing in the startup ecosystem. And this event is brought to you in partnership with Future Africa. And today we have myself and Ifeoluwa, head of legal from Future Africa, joining today. We're going to be diving deep into everything, regarding legals concerning like, setting up your infrastructure for your startup, risk compliance, you name it. And I will hand it over to Ifeoluwa to introduce herself, and we can get started.
Thanks, Gabriella. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Ife, like Gabriella mentioned, and I head the legal and compliance team at Future Africa. So just a bit of background. Yeah, I'm a legal practitioner for over 8 years. Yeah, and I've been in the technology space for quite some time now. And I started on my technology career as a lawyer at Global Accelerates, one of the leading payment provider in Nigeria and across Africa as well. And then I moved to Future Africa, and yeah, I had the legal team and the compliance team then, and yeah, it's been quite an enjoyable journey. Yeah, and it's really a great pleasure having to like work together with WeTech to bring this and celebrate the Women's Month.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. So, to get things started, we're gonna start with a little bit of an icebreaker. So, if you had a superpower to solve any legal challenge, what would it be and why?
Oh well, for me, I think I would want the opportunity to be able to like at the snap of a finger, like
Mm.
understand all the legal regulations across all countries. So I think I don't know if you know about Microsoft Suits.
No, I don't know about that.
Oh,
Please
okay.
share more.
So he has that power and ability to be able to like read over 1,000 pages of
Mm,
legal documents, legal regulations within a short period of time, basically, and then within that snap, he remembers everything word for word, line by line,
mhm.
understand the the loopholes, what to use, and all of that. So just imagine having 50 times that brain.
Mm.
I think
That's
that's it for me.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine you guys know a lot of terms, a lot of clauses, have to read a lot of books. How do you even keep up with that? I'm sure it's a lot.
Well, it's really a lot because having to like, because with what I currently do, like I have to understand not just the Nigerian regulation, like around Africa, the US as well. So it's really like a mix of it, like having to like learn almost every day, every minute of the day. There are new things, there are new regulations. So you might understand one part of it now, and then there's a change to that regulation that you have to keep up with. So it's like keeping up with the Kardashians, basically.
Well, making me go. That's funny. So okay, awesome. So knowing what you know as having a legal background and being in the venture space, like what sort of challenges do you see for like entrepreneurs in the African ecosystem, like and how can they like navigate some of these challenges?
Well, over time, one of the major things that I've seen, and like I said, that stemming from okay, having that superpower, and what I've seen over time as well with founders, is the ability to really understand the legal side of things. It's one problem, and I do not blame founders for it. And I feel that it also stems from you understanding. Once you understand your product, I feel you should be interested in having to know one or two things as well in the legal side of things. But because the environment itself is not so flexible, in making it easy for founders to be able to learn and understand. And most founders also do not engage the right lawyers in helping
Mm,
them navigate all these their legal structures and all of that. I would say that it's the same way you have like a dentist that you
mhm,
want a dentist to probably perform a heart surgery for you. It's the
mhm.
same way I see your lawyer, honestly, because well,
Right.
they're all medical doctors, but they all have their area of expertise that they
Mhm.
with and they handle things. And it's the same way the legal sector also works. Like I've seen agreement, I've seen documents, you're working on a transaction and you have a non-VC lawyer on the
Laura.
other side of things trying to like negotiate things. There are certain things in the VC space that are standard.
Right.
But because the person is a non-VC lawyer and just feels okay, it's a normal transaction, it's the way it is, you start seeing some unnecessary red flags in documents and you're like,
What
why?
is going on? Why?
Like this is pretty, but if it were to be a VC lawyer that is working on it, like the person understands and it makes negotiation even faster, easier. It even saves you time and money as a founder because you know that you're spending that money once. I worked with a founder where to work on a transaction, for instance, and they engaged with a lawyer, and then the lawyer was like, "Oh, I'm a tech lawyer." You find a lot of people saying they are tech lawyers, they're tech lawyers. And okay, the transaction started, they were supposed to send the legal documents. A transaction that usually it involves just 2 documents for that
Mhm.
transaction. The lawyer actually sent me 15 documents.
Uh-uh. What's happening? Is this what's
So
going on?
so I feel that it doesn't even put you in the right spot as a founder because it makes it seem like you really do not know what you're doing.
Mhm.
Because as an investor, that it's already a red flag for me that you don't have the right team in
Right.
place in helping you navigate through things and all of that. So that's on one side. Another,
So,
yeah,
so especially on this side, you're saying like one major problem you're seeing with founders, when it comes to legal, is actually choosing the right lawyer.
yes,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Next one. Yeah. Go on. Yeah.
Another thing that I've seen is documentation.
Mhm.
We're all enthusiastic about what we are building or we are happy about it. Nobody wants to like bring up, oh, let's document things, let's formalize things because you don't want to make it seem like, oh, I don't trust you. That's why I don't want to enter. That's why I want you to enter an agreement with me. And most times it doesn't stem from the place of trust or something. It's the same way we have this contentious discussion about prenuptial agreement and all of that, like when you
Mm,
get married. I feel that that's the same way that sometimes it, although contentious, but just for lack of a better way of explaining things, like that's the same way I always love to see when you are going into like a business relationship with
mhm.
your co-founders, with business partners, like just having it properly documented. It's just for the growth of the company. And one thing I've seen over time is that there's really no proper documentation in place for founders. And then when you're about to raise funds, it becomes an issue.
Issue.
As an investor, I'm asking you for documents. You don't have them in place. Then I have to like start helping you. Okay, these are documents you need to have. Okay, so once you are prepared, like it makes me even have confidence in you that this person knows what you're doing as a
Mm.
founder. Like you have the right documents in place, you have it all sorted and all figured out that when I'm coming in as an investor, I'm not coming in to baby you. So I think one of the issues I've seen over time is also lack of proper documentation in place, which also is still ties to the first one. If you have the right team, you have the proper documentation. Yeah, I think another thing I've seen is actually on the angle of mentorship and advisors,
Mhm.
which is major. I find out that a lot of people do not have the right mentors, right advisors. You see on
Mm.
people's pitch deck that they have a bunch of list of names as the advisors that they are working with, probably because I just wanted to show that I have someone working with Google on my pitch deck to show that the
Right.
question is, what value is this person actually bringing to the table? Is it just for the sake of I have an advisor from Google, or there's an impact that our advisor is bringing on board? So those are things that I've seen over time. A lot of them just have, and at the end of the day, they even give them equity
Mm.
without doing anything, just for the sake of I have somebody in Google working for
Google.
on my pitch deck. So I think things like that are what I want to see, like founders being intentional about, in terms of having that mentorship, that networking. We always talk about the old money, old boys, and all of that. Like we can actually bring in the new money, the new boys as well into the sector. Like, okay, let's all network. The same way we find out that there are so many ways that informally, like people exchange complete transactions just
Right.
in a gathering. Like I think we can also make that happen as well. It doesn't necessarily have to always be formal, like in the informal setting as well. Like through that networking, you having the right advisors who are able to like put you in the right places, introduce you to the right people and all of that. Yeah. So I think for me, I think we should more of in terms of way forward, I think I want to see more of investment, founders investing in their legal side of things, their legal resources. I want to see
Right.
that happen over time. The same way you would want to like put in effort in your tech product.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all, like both should work together, because if you have the product and you don't have the right regulations or compliance process in place in helping your product, at the end of the day, you tend to spend so much on liabilities
Right.
and penalties and all of that. So I think both should work hand in hand.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You mentioned something about advisors getting equity. Can you? I don't want to spend too much time on that, but high level, can you tell me like a little bit of what that looks like? You have an advisor, you give them equity. What does that look like? How much equity should you even give an advisor? Let's say they're bringing like good value to you and your team.
Yeah, so I would say that if you're having like an advisor on your team, you don't want to give them so much at the end of the day. Just look at it the same way you are giving your employees stock options. There's a
Mm,
10%. Usually, I always advocate for 10% out of your
yeah.
pool, out of your total shareholding in
Ec-
the company, just allocate 10% to the ESOP, to the employee stock options. From that, you can also give advisors from that 10%. So you can just say that for
mm,
all advisors, I can allocate that for all advisors. I don't want to give them more than 4% of the 10%, or I want to, okay, let me make it into two, five for employees, five for advisors, depending on the number of advisors you have and the value that you're giving to them. So just think about it, that you don't want to give just one advisor 5% already.
it's for all the advisors.
Just make it like it's for all the advisors, depending on the value. Because at the end of the day, but if you feel that there are more people, there are people that okay, they hold so much value, you can up the game. You can make your ESOP up to 15%.
Right.
It depends. It depends. I always advocate for value. Look out for
Right.
value. But at the end of the day, it's not so. You don't want to say by the advisor is only more than you in the company at the end of the day.
Of course. And they're just
Okay.
talking, and yeah, the mule running the business.
Yeah. So those are
Understand.
things that you look out for as well. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. That's really good. So, now that we've talked about advisor, now when we're looking at like, company, setting up your company, you mentioned so many things like, your agreements to your founders, your agreement to your advisors. Generally, what does, setting up your entity structure for your business, how should I structure my entity? Yeah, especially if I'm going to be like, we're seeing trends with like startups raising money from investors or like, both local and foreign. And then when they are dealing with these investors, what should they be looking out for, or in the, let's say, the investment agreement and all of that? So I think let's start with um, in terms of company structure and business entity, what should companies be doing? And then if they're raising capital from local and foreign investors, what should that look like?
Yeah. So we've seen this trend of we have the African entities having to like register in Delaware. So
Mhm.
you have your local entity, you have your Delaware entity, and this is because most investors want to invest in a foreign entity because of, and this is not far-fetched from the um, regulatory uncertainties for the African ecosystem. So they rather just invest in a more friendly environment, which is the Delaware and all. So now you have your local. So we've seen trends of, based on experience, I've seen trend of you have your local entity, you have your Delaware entity. The local entity usually serves as the operational entity, basically, in
Mm,
helping with the actual business. But investors want to invest through the Delaware entity. So how do you make this happen? I've seen situations whereby founders they want to set up their Delaware entity, they are setting up an LLC and all of that.
mm,
Investors, ideally, especially VCs, will not invest in an LLC because it's not tax friendly, basically,
mhm,
to them. So it's best that if you're setting up, except you're setting up a fund, yeah, it's good. You can
mhm.
do an LP and all of that LLC, but for you want to raise funds from a VC, trust me,
Yeah,
go for a C corporation in Delaware.
yeah,
It's more friendly to investors. It's best for you as well in terms of raising of funds. So now, this is now where I found like a bit of gap. Once they set up that Delaware entity, they have their local entities. Let's assume the local entity is a Nigerian entity. So there has to be like a link between that local entity and that Delaware entity. Because you find out that as an investor, I don't want to invest in nothing. Because if I'm
Yes.
putting money in the Delaware entity and the Nigerian entity is the operational entity and there's no link, it's just as if I've just put money
Into thin air, nothing.
into thin air, into nothing. So as an investor, I'm going to ask you to do a Delaware flip. And what does this
Mhm.
mean? I'm going to ask you to make sure that the ownership structure in the Nigerian entity is 100% owned or a minimum of 90% owned by the Delaware entity. What does this mean? Your shareholding structure in the Nigerian entity has to show that the Delaware entity is the majority shareholder
Right.
in the Nigerian entity. So with that, I have a link. So if I'm putting in money as an investor through the Delaware entity, you can use that money to fund or finance the operational business of the
Structure.
Nigerian entity. So I can get returns on my investment through, like, because there's a link between
Right.
both. But a lot of founders over time just set up different entities and there's no correlation
Yeah.
between both. Like, it's just both in isolation. And you've seen investors actually invest because they really do not know how this works real time.
Right.
But for most
Right.
VCs, we understand that if even YC would not invest if there is no Delaware, if you've not completed your
Corp.
Delaware flip. Yeah. So those are things that you need to structure and having the right structure. So ideally, you should have a proper C corp. So now you've done that, you've set up your entity. The next
Hmm.
thing you want to do, you have your proper documentation. One of the first things that you usually ideally see at the early stages, you have your founders agreement, you have your restricted stock purchase agreement, which is usually what allocates common stocks to
Employees.
founders, to the
Oh,
co-founders,
co-founders.
basically.
Okay.
So now is the co-founders. So there's also the ESOP plan and all of that for employees as well. That is on another side. But for the early stage founders, you have all of that in place. You have your so once you have that, I'm able to like detect, okay, as a founder, I can say that I'm taking 1,000 shares, for instance. My co-founder is taking 500. Another co-founder is taking 400. Does that really mean that most times at the end of the day, I automatically own that 1,000, or does my 1 million, or does my co-founder automatically own the 500 and all of that? So most times that's not usually the case. It's usually a case of vesting. So you need to
Mm.
understand what the vesting schedule is going to look like. And what is vesting schedule? It's just that it's just a process. I'm going to leave a bit of I'm not going to make it too complicated and remove a lot of legal terms so that it's more clear for people who really do not understand. So I'm going to use non-legal terms just for us to get it explained better. So it's a thing of, I'm giving you 1 million shares. I don't want you to automatically own the 1 million shares. I need you to work for that 1 million shares technically. So I'm going to tell you that your 1 million shares, I'm going to divide it into certain percentages. So maybe it's for a period of 4 years
Yeah.
with a 1 year cliff period.
Hmm.
So what does the cliff period mean? I would say, I would, for lack of a better word, just see it as the probationary period, whereby you are in the company for a period of 1 year. So once you stay for a period of 1 year, full 1 year, then you have your shares locked. The first percentage is locked down. If you leave before the end of the 1 year, that means that you are getting nothing.
Yes.
So it's just to
Yeah.
show that you are not just coming for the sake of the shares and then you just stay 6 months, you've gotten 6 months and automatically you
Yeah.
get your shares and you'll
You
be
disappear.
disappear. So that's the first step for you to lock it down. So now you've locked down the first year. So the remaining will then start vesting monthly on a monthly schedule. So let's say that after the 1 year, you now decide to leave at 6 months. So you don't get the full 1 million. You're only
Right.
able to get a calculation for the period of 1.5 years that you stayed in the
Right.
company. Then the rest goes back into the company.
Right.
So with that,
And sorry to interject here. Like, why is this thing, like this schedule, this vesting schedule, why is it in place? Why should anybody do that? Why should collect my 1 million shares and be doing what I'm doing? So like, why should I participate in such a thing?
yeah, so
Because
let
at the
me
end of the day, it's a risk, right? So
yes.
why?
So let me give this scenario now. So there's
Mhm.
this company that they had like five co-founders, and they didn't have they had like verbal communication, like, oh, we want to build something big,
Mhm.
and building it, we want a situation whereby we all have like what we are doing full time, but we want all of us to resign at what we are doing so that we can focus full time on this that we are doing, so we can build something big. Three out of the five were actually doing so well. They resigned. Apparently, the remaining two did not resign from their work, and they wanted to earn shares. They were not doing anything in the company, basically. The other three were doing the heavy lifting. The other two were just like, okay, I'm earning shares, whether or not I do anything. So it's just a thing of making sure that you put in your all, you're bringing in value, and you're not just coming for the sake of shares and ownership,
Mhm.
because some people just want the shares, they don't want to bring in anything. So it's just because as an investor, so I don't want to say whereby I'm investing in investors actually are investing not just in the business, they're investing in the founder.
Mhm.
There are times that you have people with good products and all of that, but they do not have good founders. They're not,
Right.
and investors do not want to invest in them because they are not teachable or they are not coachable. So what happens? So it's you as the founder that they're investing in technically. So they
Right.
want to, so I want to see that commitment in the founder as well. That okay, I know that this founder is committed and is working for that period of time to be able to get those shares. So you are working for those shares to
Right.
be able to ensure that okay, this person is committed. Then if you leave, you get the percentage of what you've worked for. So there are times whereby if the person is not performing and you've spent a period of time, for non-performance, there are clauses as well that you can have in your agreement that if you're not performing, whether you spent 1.5 years or 2 years, but for that sake, there has to be like a proper communication in that regard as well, that you get nothing at the end
Right.
of the day,
Right.
that you
Yeah.
get nothing. So those, so there are bad levers, there are good levers, and all of that. So all those clauses has to be like in the agreement as well, to ensure that the company itself is protected, and it's just not a flash that okay, I'm coming, I just come in, I signed the agreement today that okay, I become a co-founder, and within a month or two I leave and automatically I get shares.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense. So now that we understand, like, okay, some of the things you're thinking about in your the entities, that you have a local entity, maybe a Nigerian limited company or whatever, you have that as your operational entity, locally, and then you have your Delaware C corp that your foreign investors may invest in, or even local investors may invest in, and then you link that by, having that entity being the parent company of that local entity, right? So
Yeah.
that's the link. So that's the structure. Now that we understand this structure, and now I'm ready to collect money, I'm making business, I'm getting revenue, and I'm speaking to investors, right? you know and they're interested, they want to invest, and they issue me terms of my investment. What should I be thinking, when I see those terms? How do I know it's favorable for me? Or I've never had to go through an investment process. What are the things I should be knowing when I'm dealing with investors, when I'm raising my first round of capital?
Okay, so for the purpose, I think I'll delve more on the on assuming you're raising your first financing round, which is going to be an equity round, for instance. Like you've
Right.
done your regular save, you've done your crowdfunding and all of
Mm.
that. Let's assume
Right.
that that has been done, and now you want to do like the proper investment process. I think the first thing you should do, once you have your pitch deck, you're good at your storytelling, they are ready to invest. The first thing is to have your data room
Mm-hmm.
intact. And what does your data room entail? It involves all the due diligence document that an investor would naturally ask for. Okay, you have your cap table. Most times, I always advise founders, use automated cap tables. It makes life easier for you and even cleaner. I've seen like people just doing putting some Excel. Not everybody is good at Excel. So once you have like an automated process, and there are quite a number of them that you can use, there's CADA, there's RIS, and all of that, which you can use in setting up your cap table. Have your cap table, because that I want to see an overview, a proper overview of what your ownership structure currently entails. Now, the next thing I want to see during my DD process is all your commercial contracts. I want to see them as well. So you have all of that. Now, I want to see all your founders agreements, any of all of that. If you have like debts in place, just for me to have like a general overview. Now, in terms of the investment proper, I've issued you a term sheet. So what's a term sheet? A term sheet is just that document that summarizes all the basic terms of the investment, like a summary of it. And it's usually a non-binding document, technically. But
Mhm.
it's just to show, and trust me, investors will not issue you a term sheet if you are not going to invest. So the moment
Mhm.
investors start issuing you term sheets, know that okay, there's a high possibility that they want to invest, except you do not now then meet certain conditions, pre-investment conditions, such as you do not meet the DD process, which systems to having the proper due diligence document in your
Data room.
so once you pass the DD process and all of that, then be rest assured that once investors issue you with term sheets, they have the high chance and they really want to invest. So now I've seen people negotiate term sheets over time, and a number of founders really do not understand why investors are asking for that. So I'll just stick to the okay. Most of us will be familiar with the investment amount, the valuation of the company, which is usually post-money valuation most of the time. It's not unusual to see pre-money valuation as well, but most investors would rather want to see a post-money valuation at which they are investing an investment. And that would give an overview of what percentage they are owning in the company. Now, the major terms that you should focus on in your term sheet are your liquidation preference clause,
Right.
one of which is one of them. So I'll pick them in bits. So let's start with the liquidation preference clause. So what's the liquidation preference clause? It's just that clause that determines how each investor is paid back in terms when there's an issue of dissolution, there's a winding up and all of that. So there's investor A, there's investor B who is a safe holder, there's investor D and all of that. You as the common holder, as the founder. So now as the liquidation process as an investor, what I want to see is who do I rank senior in terms of when you want to pay out to an investor. So most investors, VC investors, actually come in as preference holders, which means that they have certain preferred interest in the company and all of that, compared to a common holder, which founders are usually common holders in most cases. They're usually common holders. So as a preference holder, I would rank senior in terms of how you give me those ownership that return when there's an issue of IPO sale and all of that that eventually happens. So now it doesn't just stop there. So you might have come across like a non-participating preference or a participating, or you see multipliers like 1x, 1.5x, or 2x in your term sheet. So this is what it means. If I'm a non participating if I'm asking for a non-participating preference, that means that, and I'm asking for 1x non-participating, what that means is that I just want my investment money, how much
The
I've
principal back.
yes, I just want my principal back. Let everybody go in peace. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. I don't want any additional, I don't want any plus. If I ask for 1.5, it means I want 1.5 times my investment
Right.
back. That's for non-participating. So assuming, so before I go to the participating, so assuming I ask for 2x, it's really unusual for you to see investors ask for 2x. The standard is usually 1x.
Right.
But as a founder, you should also not be too rigid because oh, you've seen that the standard is 1x, then you are saying that the investor has to take 1x. So now, if an investor is asking for 2x, there are situations that are around it, that surround it, why they are asking. Usually, there's a reasonable reason for it, especially when there's the investment itself is high risk. So look at
Right.
your investment. Why, like for instance, a company that is going down already and is looking to raise, and you're
Mhm.
asking me to have to like stick to 1x. I, as an investor, to protect myself, I might be asking for 2x at that point.
Right.
Maybe when there's a merger or something, or there's an acquisition, I want 2x back of my investment because I actually invested at just for the sake of bringing. So you look at what the investor is also giving. So it's a give and take kind of situation. You don't just stick to it that, oh, it's 1x, it has to be 1x. So you have to be flexible with your negotiations to understand the circumstances surrounding the requests. So there are times that you need to like jump on a call or just ask, okay, you've asked for 2x. Can you let us know why you want 2x? So you can actually have like a proper negotiating power as well. Because once you understand why, you would be able to know how you would want to negotiate. Also, now I'm asking for a participating preference. What does that mean? I'm asking that in addition to my 1x, any other thing that is left before I give to, after you've given common holders, and I want the rest to be shared to me as well. I want
Right.
part of it. So I don't just want my return. I also want like the interest that has accrued after the sale and everything. I want to be a part of it as well. So there are times that found investors ask for that, but the non-participating one is the non-contentious one that founders just okay, just give me whatever. I don't want too much.
Right.
To go. So now there's another one which is the anti-dilution protection. So now why do I have that in a term sheet? So the anti-dilution clause is just to protect, and so assuming I as an investor, I've invested at a 5 million valuation. So the anti-dilution protection comes into place when assuming you as the co-founder, or the founder, you want to raise an additional round, a down round. What does a down round mean? You want to raise at a lesser valuation than how much I had invested. Now let's assume that I invested at 5 million. Now you are raising another round at 3 million. The anti-dilution clause is to protect me as investor, that assuming during the 5 million round I had 5%, and now you are raising at 3 million, that means that there's a high chance that I might get diluted to the point of I own maybe less, about 1% in the company. And I don't want that. I don't want my number of shares to reduce. I want to, so there are two types of it. There's the full ratchet and there's the weighted. The full ratchet is more investor friendly. What does that mean? Just see it as I would use an illustration of, I have like a pie. So the dilution happens when, okay, I have a full pie, and then once the dilution happens, maybe I get like a quarter. You've cut out more than one quarter of my pie, and then I'm left with a quarter. So for the full ratchet is that if you like raise at 1 million valuation, my pie is still the same size.
Right.
Nothing affects my pie.
Right.
Get that the size of my pie does not
Remains the same.
remains the same. However you want to do it, just keep you have to factor it into that my pie would remain the same. So it means that you have to increase your number of share capital to be able to meet up to my number of pie to remain that same size. So now there's the broad weighted one. There's the weighted one, which also has different types, but I'll just leave it as the weighted one, which is more founder friendly, and also a way is like a middle point. So it's just a thing of, okay, now I have my pie. Instead of me having just quarter, we could come to a middle point whereby I just have like half my pie. So it doesn't get me fully diluted, that is only quarter or a piecemeal that is left. I still have like quite a number. So it's just like, it's a calculation that you do, that you calculate the original share price, original share capital that you have, including the new amount that you are raising. So it comes to like it's a calculation, and that's when it's interesting, because that's when I get to use my Excel sheets and start doing calculations. So those are times I get to like do a bit of calculation as well. So that's when the calculation comes in. With that, it's like it's just like a fair game, that okay, rather than you getting fully diluted, you just get diluted a bit, but we have to like do a bit of conversion, that you are not totally diluted, that you are left with almost nothing. So it's like compromise on the investor side of things. So look at, some investors might tell you, I really do not care, I'm asking for a full ratchet. Some would say, okay, it's fine. Okay, we are willing to compromise and get the weighted one. So another thing that you see again is the board control of the company, which you have like having board seats, protective clauses, and all of that. There are times that you see that in your term sheet, investor is telling you that if you are going to be raising another round, or you are changing certain things in the company, you are changing ownership, it has to be subject to their approval. It is not unusual. It's just part of the preference, the rights that preference holders have. But you just need to know how to negotiate to what extent If there's anyone that would lead to so many bureaucratic process, you can come to a middle point. So, but some are not unusual. Okay, for instance, it might be, I might ask as an investor that if you are going into a loan agreement of, let's say, $1,000, it has to go through my approval and all of that. You might want to say, okay, because 1,000 is quite small, let's be able to get 1,000 without your approval. Okay, let's increase it to, if you are going to take a debt of, let's say, $20,000, will go through your approval. So those are ways you can also come to negotiate. You are giving them that power, but you're not taking it totally away from them as
Right.
investors. You are just looking for alternative ways. Okay, let's compromise. Okay, 1,000 will actually lead to a lot of bureaucratic process. Let's leave it at 5,000. Let's leave it at 10,000.
Mm.
Another thing, another one is the board composition. As an investor, especially a VC investor, I might be asking for a board seat. It's not because I want to take ownership of your company or all of that, or I'm an observer seat. I just want to be able to like see. It's just to help you see how you can manage things as well, how you're dealing with issues, how to help you make decisions as well. So
Right.
it's just like a mix of it. You also don't want to be that the board seat is just occupied by you co-founders. You want to have a mix of co-founders. You want to have a mix of your preference holders. You just want to have a mix of also an independent director as well. So you want to like have a mix of it. So it's not just filled with credit, or it's just, there are times that maybe let's assume you have a seven seats for board of directors, and
Mm.
six of them are preference holders, and only you is there. Are seen situations like that. So there has to be a mix of it,
To balance out the
balance out.
control governance of the company.
Yes. So don't make it too much that you have too much of the investors and then leaving just you, or you have just a little of investor. So there has to be like a balance. For
Okay.
early stage, I usually advocate for 3 to 5. You do not, five is going over. But I think for a start, a
Three.
three a 3-man seat is fine.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
most times leave it at odd numbers. I usually
Yeah.
advise that you leave your board seat at odd numbers, so that when there's decision to make,
It's high.
there's no tie. So there's
There's no
always that breaker between, so leave it at odd numbers and not even numbers. So there's another clause that I always also advocate that founders look out for, which is the tag along and the drag along clause. So now, as the name implies, I'm dragging you along, or I'm tagging, or you're tagging along with me. So the drag along clause is more favorable to majority shareholders.
Mhm.
In what sense? So now there's going to be like a sale, like there's a potential investor that wants to come and say, okay, I want to buy the company, I want to buy like the company, and then let's say a percentage of us are willing, majority of shareholders are willing to sell. And then there are times that you find out that it is people with little percentage that will frustrate your transaction. So because you don't want anybody frustrating the transaction,
Yeah.
you are putting in a clause that maybe if there's a 50% majority that has voted for this transaction to go through, or there's a simple majority, or maybe if you have like all the preference holders approving the transaction, automatically I'm dragging you with me, whether you sign it or not. Yeah. So it's
Right.
just to give room for, so that no one is stalling transactions, especially with the growth of the company. Like, okay, there's a potential sale that is very good for the company, but because of some minority holders selfish interest, they just want to like frustrate the whole transaction.
Right.
So you just want that in place. So the tag along is now to compensate the minority holders here. So now also there's a good deal, and then they are bringing the deal to buy a high percentage of shares. So it's more
Hmm.
that the majority shareholders will want to sell on items. Maybe, oh, I'm selling my shares at $10 per share. So I, as the minority shareholder, I have the opportunity to tag along with you that you are the majority shareholder to sell. That's okay. That $10 that you want to sell your share, I'm also going to sell on the same terms as
Hmm.
you. So I'm tagging with you. So whatever terms that you are selling is what I will also be selling, which is a favorable term for me. So that's also it. Also,
Right.
going back to the board composition, another thing I wanted to mention is, if you're having a board,
Right.
part for board members that are also going to that understand your business, that are going to bring value, not board members that would frustrate you. I've
Yeah.
seen that happen over time, that you find out that you have board members that have opportunities that would benefit you as a company, but they are taking the opportunity to other companies. They're not bringing the opportunity to you. So you want to
To
be
you.
able to like have board members that have your interest at heart, as the interest of the growth of the company, and would be able to bring in opportunities for you as well. So when selecting who should be on your board, look out for those things like, okay, what value? And I will always say value is very much more important. So I think
Right.
those are, and one other thing that you might see as well is dividends. Most
Right.
investors hardly request for dividends, but it's not unusual. They just, most times they ask for 6% non-cumulative. That's if you declare that you
Mhm.
are paying dividends. Yeah. So you pay me. I'm not going to be accumulating anything. So just pay me. But if not, but that's a non-contentious, because most VC investors hardly request for it, but it's not unusual. Like they have it there in the event that you are giving other shareholders, then give
Right.
me too. But if
So
you're not declaring, if you're not giving, then I'm fine. I'm okay with it. So those are things that I believe that are quite contentious in terms of negotiation. Also, yeah, it's also like stock options, like we've mentioned. You would see that
right.
this would ask that you should you should set aside a percentage between 10%, 15%
So
for ESOP. And this is also to ensure that dilution issues are already factored into. So I don't want to invest now and it's at a later stage that you're now saying that you're setting up your ESOP. It
right.
will affect
So
me
it's
as an investor. It's going to, so I'm going to, at this point when I'm investing, set aside 10%. Let's calculate everything now and know what it is. So it's not at
before
the
you
time
invest.
that you are now setting it up that it will then affect my ownership stake. So be rest assured that you see investors asking that set up your ESOP now that I'm
First.
investing. Yeah.
So here, I guess in summary, one of the things like founders should be considering when taking money from investors, definitely before the investment process, have your data room set up, all your contracts, legal, your founder, your agreement, all your commercial agreements, every legal entity, your setup, all of that. And then when you're dealing post that, you probably get a term sheet, and this term sheet has a bunch of clauses you want to know as a founder. Some
Yeah.
of those things look like your liquidity preference, like
Yeah.
how much the investor is going to get back first before getting the rest, their own equity from the pool of profits, assuming like there is a profitable venture, right? And
Yeah.
then the other things we should be looking, founders should be looking out for is, um, I think you were mentioning, the board composition, if they're requesting for board seats. I think you mentioned a couple other ones. Please just keep me up to speed in case I missed
The
something.
drag along and the tag along,
The drag along and the tag along. Which other clause should we be looking for?
valuation, your
The
post-money,
valuation.
yeah, and
Yeah,
the type of
yeah,
security that you are issuing as well is
right.
also very much important. Like, yeah,
Yeah. So these are some of the things like founders should be looking for when they are raising capital. So now outside of the business entity and the structure and like raising money from like investors, what other agreements should or interest should founders be protecting? Like how can they protect their product? How can they protect their how they liaise with customers or how they liaise with contractors or employees or whatever the case may be. What sort of what other interests should startups be protecting now that they've collected money, they're running their business? What other things should they be looking at?
yeah. So I think okay, I think I would first of all talk about IP protection.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, you have employees and you've issued your offer of employment to employees. I'm working and there's no IP protection clause in place, which means that as an employee, for every work I do for you, for every product I help you build, I own it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the company's property. So, but you want to protect the company's property because you are paying this person. So it's like a work for hire kind of thing. So the company should ideally own the IP. So one of the things you want to look out for as a founder when dishing out agreements is to ensure that there's an IP protection clause to the company, that it's going to be a work for hire and the IP belongs to the company and not the individual that you've employed to work on certain aspects for you within the business. Another aspect is, which a lot of countries are no longer taking likely now, is the data protection side of things. So you want to ensure that whatever it is that you do, if you're collecting data, there's enough, you're correcting it properly and in line with regulation. You're storing it securely and within a period of time. Like most times, you're required to either delete data that you've collected within 5 to 6 years, depending on the jurisdiction and the location. So you need to like be familiar with this so that nobody is suing you. Before you collect data, request for consent. On your website, have data protection policy on your website. Is very important if you're receiving data, so that nobody is coming to sue you. And if they are non-essential, collect only information that you need. If I do not need date of birth, if I do not need all those information, any irrelevant information that you do not need for the purpose of whatever it is you're doing for your products, do not ask for it. Ask for only essential and necessary information, because now the law is no longer joking in terms of how data protection is being handled. Another thing that I would also want to like see founders focus on in terms of terms to look out for is also, okay, we've talked about the founders agreement, we've talked about the employment contract, is also business relationship. When you're entering into business relationship with your business partners or your customers, what are the standard documents you have in place? You just don't want to like, I'm providing a service and there's no documentation in place. Provided they are paying me my money, I'm fine. There has to be proper documentation in place, the right agreement that speaks, that covers, that protects you. What level of liability you want to look out for, your indemnification clause, your liability clauses. So there are times that you say in an agreement that you'll be liable to the customer. Maybe you would be liable to full amount that the customer has paid, or even times 10 of how much the customer has paid. So you need to like put close eyes into those clauses. You want to see what the liability limitation clauses, the indemnification clauses, like you really want to focus on them to see what extent of liability you are exposed to as a
Mm.
company. And yeah, so those are things that you should focus on. So once you've raised your equity round, and most times during equity rounds, like VC firms usually, like during their DD, already highlight like gaps. So they like let you know, okay, these are the gaps that we've identified, these are ways that you can make it better. And that's one thing, at least I know that we pride ourselves at Future Africa. Like if we're investing, part of what we do is not just to invest, we want to like see what value we can bring. Okay, once you highlight those gaps, how can we come in to help you as a founder to close those gaps? So we've highlighted them, we'll let you know, we recommend in-house to also help you like ensure that you have like a clean sheet as well. So those are things that I believe that you should look out for. And one thing I would say is that the fact that you have a standard template, please don't don't copy word for word. There are times that there's certain things there that are not applicable to your transaction at that moment. So ensure
Yeah.
that because you have a template doesn't mean that you shouldn't still engage a lawyer to help you look through.
Right.
I've seen there was a bylaw that was looking at, I was reading through the bylaw of the company, just like the memat of a company. And then I saw that the company had written there that, oh, that they had entered transaction with certain big companies and all of that. So they wrote all the names of those big companies. Then during my DD, I then requested for the agreement for those companies that they've entered transactions with and the evidence of payment, because there were big monies they were calling in that transaction to
Mm-hmm.
swap it. And the guy said, do you know that we just copied this thing? This is not like, we never entered into any transaction with these people. We
Ah,
just saw a template and then we adopted it.
that is so funny.
Yeah, and they said the funny thing is that they've actually raised about three equity rounds before we invested, and none of those that did DD for them flagged it.
Hmm.
So those are things that we see over there, especially when you know that okay, you are very meticulous with what you're doing, and the people you are going to meet, like they will look through each of your documents. So you do not want a situation whereby you are seeing some things that you yourself you cannot explain, because it doesn't
Right.
give you a
Good
uh
look.
good look that you have a document that you've been using for years, and the things there do not apply to you. They're not your
Yeah.
transaction.
That
And then you
is
signed it, you adopted it as the company's bylaw.
wow. That's actually
Just
very
like I would
amazing.
always say, please and please, there's a lot of templates out there, but be rest assured that your situation is different. Each situation, like the drafters of templates cannot factor in all scenarios. Like for instance, now Future Africa is also going to be publishing soon about resource that we can use. Like we are working on certain resources that we can help founders as well. So I'm sure once we launch, you can also have access to those free resources and reach out. So we try as much as possible to explain, but in as much as those resources are there, do not substitute them in all situations for your lawyers.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
your own scenario, your own situation might, there are terms that
Unique.
you that are unique to you, or there are terms that you want to tweak that would not be applicable in your situation. So it's good to have an idea, it's good to have the template. It saves you a bit of cost. So in
Right.
that situation, you are not just asking a lawyer to draft from scratch. You are only asking for a review of the document for you. So those templates are just there to help you, to serve as a guide, but not as oh, you are picking it up and then you are just adopting it.
Adopting it. Yeah. So, in your experience now, like, it seems like there's a knowledge gap now for a lot. Of course, legal is very complicated. People don't even want to deal with it. It's like it's a lot, it's complex, it's boring. Oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with all of this, right? How is that gap and like resourcing to help, startups help with their legal side of things? What are you seeing in terms of like barriers when it comes to like female founders? Do you feel like female founders like have access to some of this information, or they don't have access to this some of information, or you know what can really help them? Because at the end of the day, our organization was focused on helping like women in tech, and this is Women's Month. So how all these things that we've talked about, how does these things affect female founders specifically? How can they get access to those legal and financial resources for them to struggle as a start, not to succeed as a startup? Um, and is there anything you can chime in that area?
Yeah, so I think one thing I'm grateful for is what WeTech is doing for the female community. So at least you have that community, you have like a group of people of same like minds that you can relate to. And there are resources that are available to everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah, so you have like I said, Future Africa is going to be publishing one soon. You can go to, there's Clarky, there's Cooley, there's NVCA, which is the standard for most of equity financing. So there's Seed Legals. There are quite a number of them that are tested and trusted kind of thing that you could use. So it's just the applicability is where I see the knowledge gap. And this can be done with something like this that we are doing, just to help enlighten women generally on what to focus on. So even if you have a lawyer that is helping you with the review, you as a person, you know what you're focusing on, you know what you're negotiating at the end of the day. So with this, I think a more of networking and having seminars like this that help women to close that gap would be really helpful. Like, okay, we know that there are resources, but how do I apply this resource? What am I looking at? Because I really do not know what am I. It's just like I have like someone is a tech person who has series of codes that they've written and all of that, and you provide the access to me as a non-tech person. I really wouldn't know what I'm looking for. I wouldn't know what to focus on. So this is why um, um, webinars and talks like this would actually help women in understanding and knowing what to focus on, because you really do not want to spend most of your time having to like learn about all the legal side of things when you have product and all of that to deal with. And that's why I would say that just invest in your legal resources, invest in the right legal team. Once you have the right legal team, all they would need to do for you, that you would need as a founder, is just that summary of what you should focus on. You do not need to worry about, oh, each of the clauses, or I have to read a 49 pages document. You did not, you have other things to worry about as a founder,
Mm-hmm.
not be your
Mm-hmm.
major worries. Leave that to the lawyer. The same way I would leave coding to the tech guys. Focus on it. You just break it down to me. And what they will do, what the tech people will do, is help break down all these binary, non-binaries that you have on your system to me as a non-tech person. And that's why when you have the right legal person, they're able to break it down for you and make you focus on ideally what you are to focus on. So if I send you a term sheet, for instance, all your lawyer needs to do is help you highlight, okay, they've asked for 2x of this. Are you okay with it? Okay, we would suggest that you push back on XYZ. So you don't need to like focus on all the terms, but the ones that are very contentious that they would need your feedback on, or probably they feel that okay, this should, you can push back on this. And once you have the right team, I think that you necessarily don't have to worry. And in saving costs, you can use all those resources I've said, and there are also like various good law firms as well that you can work with in terms of providing such services to you as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really good. And then lastly, what advice can you leave for our audience today, or whatever legal must-haves or anything to keep in mind? Whatever top three things come to your mind. Yeah, I'll leave that to you.
Okay, I would say that for me, I think one of the major factors that I would say that for we women we should take away is fear. See, we women are doing a great thing, and we are doing so much that we allow fear and the society to like make us feel like we can't do this, we can do more. And what I've seen over time is that even female led companies are actually more successful than the male led ones. So why is it that investors don't want to invest really? So I think we should also look at, okay, what am I not doing well? Is it my pitch that I'm not pitching well? Am I not able to do my storytelling well? So once you identify those gaps, you can actually employ people or go for trainings or people who can help with that aspect as well, to help you focus on different areas that there's a knowledge gap that you feel that you should focus on. So don't just leave it as, oh, it's because I always tell women around me, don't let's focus on, okay, it's because I'm a woman. Look at it as well. What can I do better?
Mm-hmm.
Able to be able to prove that I can actually do this. I don't just want to be given this thing because I'm a woman. No,
Mm-hmm.
I want to earn it. I want to know that I actually earned this as a woman.
Right.
Have I done my own homework? Have I done my assessment? Have I done what is expected of me? Then I believe that with this, and we are not looking at what the society has to say, at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, I think there's really so much out there that we can do, and so much opportunities for us. And I'm grateful for like different platforms now that are really encouraging, even investors now. You see some investors that will tell you that if your company is not does not have like a gender balance of maybe 50% women as well, we are not investing. So there's this two
Mm-hmm.
extra challenge as well that we've seen, that investors will tell you, okay, if your leadership team does not involve women, so like if you want to be in that leadership team, one thing I always say is, what impact are we bringing as well? We don't just want to be in the leadership team without having to make impact. So I'm impact focused as
Right.
well. We are
And
doing it,
then,
and then we are making an impact.
is that the major piece you want to leave us with?
Yes, impact.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for all the details on legal, and all the tea you're spilling today, because honestly, even myself, I learned a lot about like startups, and you know, de-risking a lot of things when it comes to running a business from a legal perspective. I'm going to open the floor a little bit to the audience, see if there's any questions. Um, anyone has some questions in the audience, please throw it in the chat or comment, and I'll be able to what you call it, we'll be able to answer them. If not, there will probably be a time. So I'll probably give it like a couple seconds and see if people have questions in the chat. Sure. Um, so far, I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Um, it may be the case that we don't have any. Maybe that's great. But anyways, thank you so much for your time, Ifeoluwa.
Thank you for
It's
having
been
me.
great. It's been great, like chatting with you. I think the recording will probably be posted on our YouTube channel, and we'll be sharing that too as well for those who couldn't make it.
Okay.
So this information is going to be online forever, hopefully. Um, and hopefully people can reference it back to learn more. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. It was great having you. And this is our last event for Women's Month, and I hope like everyone has had a time, just engaging with our community and learning and just like being empowered, this month and honestly through the rest of the year, because what we're doing is a continuous thing and not just for 1 month. But
Yeah.
excited that we can concentrate a lot of things in this month, because Women's Month is that month where we really get a special time where we can really celebrate women.
Yeah.
So thank you so much again for coming. It's been a pleasure talking here, and I hope everyone has a good rest of their weekend. So
Thanks.
that's awesome. That's it. Bye bye.
Bye.